So, you want to know how to use commas, do you? Okay, coming right up. Hello, my name is Cleave Bourbon. I am an English teacher. I'm also a writer. I've written several novels. I'm just about finished with my epic fantasy series, Shadows of the First Trine, and I'm working on Tournament of Mages, is my other series, and I've got a couple other things in the works. But anyway, I'm starting this author tube because of a couple of reasons. And I wanted something that would differentiate me from all the other writer advice people, author tubers that you have out there. And so I decided that I might use my teaching side, my English teacher side, with my writer side and offer a little bit of both. So I thought I'd probably alternate them. I'm going to give the regular videos that author tubers do, like, for example, where I publish, how to publish on KDP, all the other kind of, Kindle Direct Publishing, all the other kind of typical author tube, advice, my own spin on it, of course. But I'm also going to give you some writer mechanics, how to use commas, any kind of grammar questions that you may have that you want me to cover in the videos, so that you not only have what it takes to be an author and have a novel, but you also have the tools that you need to actually write the novel in the first place. So maybe it'll give you the ability to self-edit. People do self-edit. Editors are expensive. However, I will caution you that even though I'm going to teach you how to edit and things like that, I have English degrees and I still have to have an editor, because there's no substitute for somebody else putting their eyes on your work and actually editing your work for you. Your brain tends to work against itself. You have a creative side and an analytical side, and they work against each other. That's why it's not a good idea to try to write and edit at the same time. It doesn't really work very well. So you write the story, you get it all written, and then you send it to an editor. However, when you send it to an editor, if you want the turnaround time to be fairly quick and you want the editor to get through it fairly easily, it's a good idea to already have a clean manuscript. By a clean manuscript, I mean to get it as polished as you possibly can before you send it to the editor. That way they don't have such a hard time editing it. Your turnaround is a lot quicker, possibly even depending on your word count, possibly even maybe even cheaper. I don't know. That part I don't know because I'm not an editor. But I did want to offer some mechanics as well as some writer advice. So I'm going to try to alternate them. I'm going to do writer mechanics first, and then the next video, the next week, I'll do some sort of writer tube, video, like some mistakes writers make, things like that new writers make, and along those lines. But so the first one I'm going to make today is going to talk about commas, because the commas are by far, when I grade essays as a teacher, are by far the most, I don't know, not necessarily misused, just disused or misunderstood, or not able to get them correctly on the paper, or however you want to say it. It tends to be the biggest mistake that I see when I'm grading essays. And so a lot of people have questions about when to put a comma and when not to put a comma. And when I was younger, I also had that same problem. Even when I became a young writer, for a long time I didn't know until I actually went to college for my English degrees, and then I finally was able to figure out what comma usage was, and how to do it on every kind of situation, especially when I'm writing. So the first mechanics that we're going to talk about today is going to be commas. Now, I tried to record this earlier today, and it ended up being like an hour long. That's how much comma advice that I have. So, I mean, it's like a whole course on commas. So I decided to keep all of that, but I'm going to split it into two parts. I'm going to do part one, where we talk about commas up to a certain point, and then next week I'll have another video about mistakes of writing, or something like that has to do with the actual, if you have a novel completed. And then the week after that, I'll do part two of this comma usage video, comma mechanics. So I do some teaching. I teach on OutSchool online, and I do have a lot of grammar classes that I do teach, and so I teach part of this in those grammar classes. So I get a lot of adults because in OutSchool it only teaches up to 18 years old. So I get a lot of adults that ask me, "Hey, I would like to polish up on some of the grammar. Can I sit in or whatever?" And of course, we can't allow that because OutSchool safety doesn't allow adults to be in the class or to take the classes. It's only for, up to 18 years old. So I have to tell them no. So this is the chance I can send people here. This is the chance for the adults to polish up on your grammar and your grammar rules. And hopefully it won't be too boring. I try to make it very lively. I know it's sometimes grammar can be like watching paint dry, but I try to make it at least a little bit entertaining. So that's one of the reasons why I have this in 2 parts, is so that we can maybe make it a little bit more palatable. I know palatable is what if you're eating, you're not going to eat commas, but anyway, you know what I mean? A little bit more digestible. So there I go again with food. As you can probably tell, I like food. I'm a big food person. All right. I know that when I bring up this PowerPoint, the white screen, and I have a big, huge white screen, it makes me look like I'm a ghost, and my white Santa Claus beard becomes even more white. But you're getting instruction from a ghost. So here we go. All right. So the first thing about commas, and I'm going to put this towards someone who writes or wants to write a novel, and you're like, "Hey, how do I do this comma stuff?" These are the ones that you'll probably see the most when you're writing. The first one, of course, is the interjection. Interjection is a word that expresses emotion, like "Hey" or "Why" or "Wow, I didn't know that." It's what interjection is. If you're Generation X like me, then you saw the interjection song on Schoolhouse Rock like every Saturday morning, like 50 times. So that's how I memorize them. "Hey, you're throwing it the wrong way." But anyway, so wow, that was rude. Following my example here. That comma is used when the feeling isn't quite as strong. It's like, wow, that was rude. Not a really big emotion. Use a comma, and of course, it can also be written like, "Wow, that was rude." Where you have more emotion and you use the exclamation point. That's how interjections are done. Comma if it's not very strong emotion, and exclamation point if it's a stronger emotion. So that's one way you use a comma, and obviously that's going to be in dialogue. So that helps you if you're writing your dialogue. You probably don't see me, but I'm moving my hands all over the place. That's you're going to be using interjections in dialogue. Interjections aren't for academic writing. You wouldn't say, "Hey, the gross national product of Japan is awesome." You might say that, but if you had a professor that read that, they'd probably be like, "What are you talking about?" So anyway, you're going to see those a lot in creative writing. Another thing you might see in creative writing is, "I have 2 dogs, 2 cats, and a goldfish." There's 2 commas there. That's called comma in a series, or words, splitting up a series. That second comma, the one after cats and before "and," that's called the Oxford comma. And my editor, I'm Generation X, so I was taught you don't have to put that comma in there. No, you don't have to put that in there. But when I got an editor, my editor is a millennial, and she said, "Yes, you have to have the Oxford comma. It's absolutely important." And so I was like, "No, it's not. We don't have to have that." And they're like, "Yes, it is." So I went to another editor, and they're like, "Yes, we want the Oxford comma." So I guess the Oxford comma is a thing now. So I use it. I've been trained to go ahead and put the Oxford comma back in there. So you might as well get used to it, I guess. Every indie author that I've worked with so far has requested, or if I leave it out, they put it back in when they're doing their edits. So yeah, it's a thing, I guess. All right, and I do it. All right, so in dialogue, obviously you have commas, like Jill said, "Comma, you are a funny guy." There's a comma there, obviously, and I just said but in the next line when you have someone saying "what did you say?" Obviously you put a comma there after you might do it with another word like exactly. That's why I wanted to know, the exactly, you put a comma after that. It's all dialogue stuff, et cetera, et cetera. The reason why I'm not going over that in a lot of detail is I always get my dialogue pretty much wrong. My editor's always fixing that. I mean, I get it pretty right, but I put the commas in and everything like I'm supposed to, and I do everything I'm supposed to. But for some reason, there's a couple of things that my editor always fixes, and I don't understand why, because to me it's perfectly okay. But editors are picky. So that's one of the reasons why I'm giving this presentation here, is because, you know, you want to get as close to perfect as you can, and then the editor's still going to kick you in the teeth. Just beware. It doesn't matter. I think I pretty much followed the book, you know, the grammar book on this, but you know, there's different style books. For one, there's the MLA style, which is what I'm used to, which stands for the Modern Language Association. It's what when you cite sources and stuff in essays and in academia, which is what I am used to. Then there's the Chicago style manual, which is what most copy editors are using, and it's slightly different. So there's gonna be some slightly stuff that, you know, there might be a comma place here, a place there, it might be a little different. But as far as dialogue goes, the grammar checking programs usually fix that for you for the most part. You know, if you need to have, if you have a comma and it needs a comma there, sometimes it'll tell you, it'll put a little red line under the word, and you right click on it, and it'll say put a comma. So it kind of fixes that problem, and it's not that big of a deal. However, there are places you can't follow with those Grammarly and Writerly and all those other you know, programs exactly, because there are times when they will put something like, hey, put a comma there, and you don't really need one, or it'll do it in a weird spot, and it's like, okay. Or it'll try to change a word that's very, very strange. The one I've been getting lately is when I use something like Grammarly just to kind of check over stuff, it'll have like in dialogue, she went to the store, he said, and it'll want to change he said to he spoke, which I'm like, no, we're not going to do that. So sometimes those programs, you know, work for you in your favor, and sometimes they don't. You just have to kind of, you know, be aware of that kind of stuff. Then the last comma that you'll see a lot of in your writing is after transition words, like however, comma, we do not have to like following rules. There is some special rules with transition words like that I'll go over later. You put a semicolon in front of them sometimes in certain situations, and I'll go over those in a later video, but right now we're just doing commas. We'll do semicolons later. All right, so to understand how to put commas in a lot of things like phrases and clauses, you have to understand what a phrase and a clause is, right? So this is a quick definition of a phrase and a clause. A phrase is a group of words that does not have both a subject and a verb in it. It can have one or the other. It cannot have both. If it does, it's a clause. So a phrase would be something like around the corner. That's a prepositional phrase. Or over the hill, another prepositional phrase. Or it could be is running or has been going. Those are verb phrases. So a phrase is a group of words that doesn't have both. It can have one or the other, a subject or a verb, but not both. If it has both, then it's a clause. So a clause is an independent clause is a sentence. Like she likes to shop. That's an independent clause. It's she is the subject, likes is the verb, and it has a period. It's a complete sentence. And dependent clause is when you take an independent clause and you slap a subordinating conjunction on there. So instead of saying she likes to go shop or she likes to shop, you say because she likes to shop, I gave her a little bit of money or something, or because she likes to shop, I kept the money from her. I don't know, however you feel about that. By adding the conjunction, it's called a subordinating conjunction. Now, what people sometimes the dependent clause is called a subordinating clause too. People kind of freak out at that terminology. Subordinate, you know what a subordinate is? It's like if you have a general and the lieutenant colonel's underneath him, come up to him and says, "Hey, general," and salutes him and everything. The general is the superior officer, and the lieutenant colonel is the subordinate. He's the subordinate officer. Or you have a manager at work and you're the employee, you're the subordinate. All right, that's the same thing that a subordinate clause or a dependent clause. It's exactly what that is. It means that it can't stand by itself. It has to have a main clause with it for it to be a sentence. We call this sentence a compound sentence. So you have an independent clause, like we can put these two together. The dependent clause I put here is after he left the show, or because John is leaving, or something like that. Or if you like vegetables. See, it's not complete. If we were having a conversation, I said, "Hey, if you like vegetables," you're like, if I like vegetables, what? You know, it needs more to it, right? Or if I said, after the show, you'd be like, what? After the show, what? You know, it's not complete. So, but if I said, after the show, let's go out for drinks. All right, then I put let's go out for drinks is the main clause. Or if I say because John is leaving, and say because John is leaving, why don't we stay for another couple of hours because we don't like John or whatever. You have to have a main clause with it. We call that like I said, a compound sentence. So you use compound sentences when you combine sentences. So here's how so what does that have to do with commas? Well, this is how you do a comma in a compound sentence. If the subordinate clause, the dependent clause, is the first clause in the sentence, if it opens the sentence, then after that clause is completed, you put a comma between it and the main clause. So this sentence here, when a dependent clause opens a sentence, you place a comma after the dependent clause. That sentence right there is a compound sentence, because when is the subordinate conjunction. You can tell because the comma always follows the subordinate clause. So when a dependent clause opens a sentence, that is the dependent clause. All right, the dependent clause is when, the first part of that sentence. So we have a comma, and then the main clause is you place a comma after the dependent clause. So if you reverse that and you put the main clause first, and you said you place a comma after the dependent clause when a dependent clause opens a sentence, you don't put a comma. I know it's kind of confusing. Let me get to an actual sentence that doesn't have dependent and independent clauses in it. Let's go down to the bottom line where it says, because John is a jerk. Because John is a jerk, we all decided not to invite him to the party. All right, that one, you see the little comma here? That means that first word is the subordinating conjunction. That's the conjunction. And the second clause here, that is the independent clause or the main clause. So because the dependent clause or subordinate clause is the first clause in the sentence, we put a comma. And because the main clause is the second one, we put a comma. All right, so because John is a jerk, we decided not to invite him to the party. All right, so if you reverse this and you put the main clause first, we decided not to invite him to the party because John is a jerk. Okay, there's no comma in that sentence because the main clause is first and the subordinate clause is second. Does everybody understand that? That's how it works. The main clause, if it begins a sentence, you don't have to worry about commas at all. That means the dependent clause is at the end of the sentence. If the dependent clause or subordinate clause, whichever one you want to call it, I'm going to call it dependent. The dependent clause is the beginning clause, then you put a comma after that clause. All right, and that tells you too when you see a comma, when you see a comma like that, that tells you that first word is the conjunction. The word conjunction, by the way, junct means to join. That's what the conjunction does. It joins the two together. Without the conjunction, you just have two dependent clauses. John is a jerk, and we all decide not to invite him to the party. So without because, you have two independent clauses. What makes this dependent is the conjunction. Okay. So here is the last part of what I'm going to do for today. And I'm going to end this video here, part one here. Don't use a comma if the dependent clause comes after the independent clause or the main clause. I already said that once. I just want to say it again because the research says that when you hear things 3 times, you commit it to memory. So one more time, don't use a comma if the dependent clause comes after the, wait, did I say that backwards? Don't use a comma if the dependent clause comes after the independent or main clause. Okay. All right. So I color-coded this one down here for you so that you can kind of see both. I am explaining how to use them with dependent clauses. Okay, talking about commas. Okay, that's I put it in parentheses. That's the independent clause. That's a sentence that can stand by itself. Okay, comma usage can be difficult. That's also an independent clause until we put the word because in front of it. Because comma usage can be difficult, then it becomes a dependent clause, which is what it is. So then, like I said, the word junct means to join. So, all right. So that's up to how to use them with clauses. The next video is the one that was made in the other video that I made long. It's where I start explaining phrases, because phrases, prepositional phrases, participial phrases, positives, all that kind of stuff. That's where all the comma starts coming through pretty strong. So I didn't want to like bombard you with all of that at once. Like I said, it was an hour long. So I'm going to end the video here at the end of the clauses. I think phrases is next. Well, we'll look at the phrases real quick, but I'll tell you how to do the commas on these next time. So verb phrases, prepositional phrases, infinitive phrases, positive phrases, participial phrases, and what it means to say that the information in the phrase is essential or non-essential. That all depends on where you put the comma, if it's essential or non-essential. But we'll do that next time. So I'm going to stop sharing and kind of end here. Okay, so this was one of my first videos, so you'll have to take it with a grain of salt, meaning that I will get better. I know that my nose is a little stuffy right now, so I'm sucking air a little bit, asthmatic kind of. So hopefully all that will clear up eventually, and I'll get better at presentation. I'm used to teaching this way, but I'm used to talking to people when I'm teaching. So there's usually people watching me, and right now there's not. So it's kind of odd, but I'll get used to it, and we'll move on. If there are any grammar questions that you have, anything at all pertain to your writing, or if there's something you struggle with when you're writing your novels or you're writing your essays or whatever you're writing, and there's something you don't understand, and just put it down in the comments below and let me know, and I will address that. I'll either tell you in the comments below, or I'll make a video out of it and tell you that way. But either way, I'll let you know that I've, okay, I'll go over that in a future class or something. But if there's anything at all grammar wise that you're struggling with or that you have issues with, just let me know and I will address it. That's what I'm here for. But also, to be honest, really anything that you have to do with writing in general, you could also ask me that, where to publish, how to publish, where do I get my covers, my book covers? Can you make your own book covers? Things like that. I can cover all that as well. All right. So I will see you next time, and I thank you very much. If you found this useful, just like everybody always says, like and subscribe, please do. Or tell your friends, or if somebody else needs to understand grammar or learn some or polish up on their English grammar, then send them my way and let me grow this channel and see if I can help them out and help you out. All right, thanks. Bye-bye.